Brother John Phelps, welcome to the broadcast today. We're with Brother George Widger on this August 22nd, 2023. Welcome again, and may the Lord bless us as we engage in a most interesting conversation, I would say, today. As Brother George will be giving us some more information, I'll be talking somewhat about China and its invasion. So, Brother George, welcome to the broadcast today.
Well, thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
It's always a pleasure to have you. You always bring something new and exciting to the mix. So what do you have for us today, Brother George?
Well, before I get to the feature presentation of my scripture verses, John 17, verses 21 through 24. John 1:7, verses 21 through 24. That they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, and they all also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. And the glory which thou gavest me, I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. And I in them, and thou in me, that thou may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and thou hast loved them as thou hast loved me. Father, I will that they also, whom thou hast given me, be with me where I am, that they should all behold my glory, which thou hast given me, for thou lovest me before the foundation of the world. I'm sorry, this is like my small print Bible. And my areas aren't quite as good as they used to be. Well, they're never great to begin with, but it seems as if that each year it gets harder and harder to make out the print on things.
That's true. As we draw nigher to the dust, things start to begin to fail, but it was okay. We can understand it. And of course, that's John 17, and that's the Lord's Prayer. Matthew 5 is not the Lord's Prayer. John 17 is the Lord's Prayer. And it's a wonderful, wonderful prayer of Christ to the Father, and has all sorts of wonderful truths in it, as the one true God, that the Father's in the Son's in the Father, and yet they're two separate, distinct persons. So it's a great prayer, and it's also a prayer for us, that he prayed for us. He prayed for us, those that we believe on him, who would be yet to come, and that's us. So he prayed for us, George. So that's a great prayer, okay. John 17. Yep.
Okay, well, amen, brother. And of course, I need to horseshoe this in. Catholic apologists, and even non-Catholic, well, all right, you have Catholics and you have closet Catholics who feign to be Bible-believing Christians. I just want to say that. But Catholic apologists, well, see, that means why all you non-Catholics need to become Catholics. Jesus said, hey, may they be one.
Well, that has nothing to do with the ecumenical movement and uniting with the papacy. That's just the Jesuits and their master ability to corrupt and twist the scriptures, to seduce you with them, as Edward de Vere wrote in his Shakespearean works. Even the devil doth quote the scripture for his own purposes. And so this is typical of the priests and of the papacy. They hate the scripture. They burn it whenever they can. And they burn us too. So that's the history of the Roman papacy. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I like to check out what the enemy has to say occasionally. I think they call that counterintelligence. So there's a website I came across a few years ago called The Blue Collar Catholic. The fellow's name is Rob. I don't know his surname. And I guess he lives in Florida, Orlando. And he's, I guess, in his late 50s, 57, 58. And he says from roughly the year 1985 to 2015, he was an evangelical Bible-believing Protestant. Now, he's from New Jersey. He grew up Italian, Irish, Roman Catholic. But, his confirmed and catechized, all that sort of stuff. But he left the faith by the time he was a teenager. And he became, quote, born again, close quote, around the time he was 20 or so, when he joined the Navy. And he became a staunch non-denominational Christian. So he went to churches of various types, Southern Baptist, Assembly of God, you name it. But then he realized the error of his ways, roughly 8 years ago, and he decided to come back to Mama. And he returned and he was received back in the Catholic Church, I guess, back in 2015, 2016, thereabouts. So he likes posting these videos and about talking about the follies of Protestantism and things like that. And he recently, I guess over the weekend, did a video about an agreement between the Southern Baptist Convention and the Roman Catholic Church. It was a joint document. I don't know the release date, but the LA Times actually wrote a piece about this back on, I believe, on August 26th of that year, in which, according to this document, the SBC and the Church of Rome basically agree on pretty much everything. You know, they may differ on some trivial things, whatever that is, or whatever, or rather whatever they are. But they agree that we're justified by faith, not by faith alone, but we're justified by faith.
Yep.
And
there's got to be some participatory salvation, otherwise the Jesuits would never agree to that. I mean, all you got to do is read the 25 sessions of the Council of Trent, and it's very clear. And every pope swears to uphold the Council of Trent. Go ahead.
Well, amen. So there's a similar document that came out 5 years later, 1994, called ECT, Evangelicals and Catholics Together, in which there were something like 40 participants involved, 20 Catholics and 20 so-called Protestants, which is spearheaded by the late Chuck Colson and the late Father John Richard Neuhaus. Now, Neuhaus was a Lutheran and was a Lutheran minister, but he converted over to Rome. Colson professed to be a Southern Baptist. He grew up Episcopalian, but he became a Southern Baptist in the 1970s after he went to prison. And
he committed the criminal act of the Watergate matters, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also Newt Gingrich, that Rhino Republican, pardon me, was a Southern Baptist, and he converted to Catholicism too. So we're seeing this happening, and this is always what happens before the Catholics and the Protestants and Baptists unite in military operations. So the Jesuits were very careful to bring this about first, so when they have their war here, and they start they can unite, particularly all the white men together, to fight the Pope's Crusades, wherever they will be. Go ahead.
Okay, well, this is something. Okay, but I need to pause here. Without addressing the specific document that came out in 1989, so you're talking roughly 34 years ago. This is something we've discussed before. According to Chinnick in his book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, generally speaking, the Jesuits planned things decades ahead of time, sometimes centuries ahead of time, but usually a minimum of half a century ahead of time.
That's right.
So, if that were correct, this document, which came out in 1989, they'd probably been working on that since no later than 1939. Forgive me for stating the obvious. So, Pearl Harbor was in the works probably no later than year 1891. 9/11 no later than year 1951.
Yep.
So
that's right. It makes perfect sense. I mean, they're the masters of the military arts. We have to realize the Jesuit order is a military company. It calls itself the company. The head of it is called a general, the superior general. So it's a complete and total military operation. And so therefore they're masters in the arts of warfare. They brought Sun Tzu out of China and translated it into Europe. So they're the masters of the art of war. And so whatever they do, it always fits in their design of how they're making war and to what end.
Oh, okay, well, getting back to this 1989 Southern Baptist documents. Now, for what it's worth, I've only been to a Southern Baptist church once for like 20 years ago. I decided to go check it out. Yeah, okay, I spent like an hour there, and it was probably about 60 minutes too long. But maybe I spent a little bit longer. But anyhow, so I just have never been enamored with them. But so this So I don't know who the signatories were to this document. So first, we need to know who signed it and what were their backgrounds. Yes, they profess to be Southern Baptists, but where did they go to school? Who were their instructors and professors? Also, how many of them were or if they're still alive, or were members of some sort of secret society, such as some form of Freemasonry? So these are things that we have to know. Or were they simply incognito Jesuits posing as Baptist ministers?
That's entirely possible, because in their extreme oath, they put forward that they will pretend to be Protestants and Lutherans and whatever to bring them back to Holy Mother Church. Even the great ex-Jesuit Alberto Rivera said so, that they all penetrated into all these different denominations to bring them back to the papacy. So that's both in their extreme oath, and it's in their ecumenical ecumenical Council of Trent. Ecumenical, remember, the Council of Trent is ecumenical, is to bring back the Protestant churches to being subject to Rome. And the Jesuits are the masters of all ecumenical reunification movement.
Okay, so to that end, now, as I said, there will be a similar document that came out in 1994. As a matter of fact, that was the impetus for the Dave Hunt book, A Woman Rise the Beast. By the way, for those who have not seen or have not read the book, I highly recommend it. Don't see eye to eye with him on everything. And if you've not seen the video, I'd also recommend it also. So Dave
Hunt, his book, A Woman Rides the Beast, is nearly as important as Chinneke's 50 Years in the Church of Rome. I quote them both in my book, Vatican Assassins, and I recommend the listener have both those books for their libraries.
Well, okay, so you're talking 1989, 1994. There was ECT one. I know there's been at least one other one. But then in 1999, you made reference to Lutheran. There was something called the Lutheran Catholic Accord, which was issued on October 31st, 1999. I realized that date was coincidental. But anyhow, so I guess most Lutheran churches are part of something called the World Lutheran League, or something along those lines. Now there are a couple of
member of the World Council of Churches too, which the Pope controls.
Yes, so they said, you know what? As we're heading, as I said, this was 1999. So as we're drawing a close on the 20th century and heading into the 21st century, and we're rapidly approaching the 500-year anniversary of the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, we Lutherans and Catholics need to reconcile our differences. Let bygones be bygones. What happened in the past should stay in the past.
Oh, okay, so let all the murder of the Lutherans just be gone. Let the murder of 1/3 of Germany disappear because of the 30 Years' War. We'll just let all those bygones be gone, right? Mm-hmm. Let all the Lutherans that were murdered in the holy office of the Inquisitional dungeons, we'll just let that all go, right? Well, not a word of papal doctrine is changed. Not a word. As Jesuit General Lorenzi Ricci said of the Jesuits when Louis XV said, "Can the Jesuits create change?" He said, "Let them be as they are or else not be." Nothing has changed with the Jesuits. Nothing has changed with papal church doctrine. And to want to reunify with that after there are murderers and taking the Bible from us and burning our Bibles? Yeah, after you apologize for the Council of Trent and the Jesuit order, we might think about it. But oh no, two different doctrines. Salvation by works for the papacy, salvation by grace in the historic Lutheran Church of the Augsburg Confession.
Well, they could say, well, hey, nobody's perfect. Well, I mean, I think I've mentioned before, I was actually baptized Lutheran. I sprinkled Lutheran as an infant because my mom was Lutheran. But that's another conversation altogether. I later got dunked in a Baptist church, but anyhow.
Baptisms by immersion, scriptural baptisms by immersion. So anything else is not scriptural baptism. Amen.
So even the Eastern Orthodox, they get that correct.
Yes, they do. I was one of their baptisms once. Yeah.
Okay, so especially the Greeks. I mean, after all, it's their language. But anyhow, the my brother Dan and his wife Doris. I don't mean to air family laundry. They've been members of an evangelical Lutheran church, ELCA church, for 25, 30 years. And of course, how should I put this? They used to have a female minister there at their congregation. If that tells you anything.
They used to have a feminazi there that was the quote-unquote minister, contrary to the teaching of Scripture, because a bishop is to be the husband of one wife. So they just threw out the Scriptures and did whatever they want to do when they put a woman there.
Oh, okay, so
a minister of the gospel is in sin and disobeying the Scripture. But go ahead.
Okay, so back in the year 2000, just before the whole 9/11 thing, I guess the ELCA, the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, was having their annual convention, which is something they've been doing, I guess, for decades. And this particular year, it was in Indianapolis. And so the issue they're discussing then, back in 2001, 22 years ago, is the whole idea of homosexuality, whether they should allow homosexuals to become members of churches, whether they should ordain them, whether they should do commitment ceremonies, all that sort of stuff. And they didn't come up with a decision back in 2001. They said, what we'll do is we'll punt the ball and come back and address this in 3 years, 2004. And so I remember...
Well, that's ridiculous, because the Bible is very clear that homosexuality or sodomy is a sin. That's why we have the remains, the archaeological remains of Sodom. And there's a tremendous video you can watch of a young man with his wife, I believe, as they're walking through the area of Sodom, and they pick out these little balls, those sulfur balls that they can set on fire. And so they prove it. That's Sodom. He shows where the street was, and it's an amazing video, but it was destroyed for homosexuality and other sexual sins. So it's final in Scripture. There's no but about whether or not it's right or wrong. It's final. That's why they don't want the Bible in the public schools, because when you start reading that in Romans 1 and so on, it utterly condemns sodomy, homosexuality, because you can't, it's sin before God, and you can't have a nation with it. It cannot exist. Go ahead.
Okay, so I remember I guess I was emailing my sister-in-law, Doris, and I said, wait a second. I realize, we have serious theological differences in practices because I tend to be more Baptistic. But I said, if you're a Christian, if you're a child of God, it shouldn't take you 3 years to make a decision. It shouldn't take you 3 seconds to make a decision. What your views are on this behavior.
That's right.
And her response was, well, George, you're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah, you're entitled to your opinion.
You go to your church.
Yeah. I don't care what the Bible says. That's what she really means. I'm going to do what I want to do. That's what the answer is about. But she's got to cover it up. You're entitled to your own opinion and mine. What your truth is your truth and my truth is mine. All that sin in throwing out the absolute literal reading of Scripture.
Okay, so I try to be as charitable and as ironic as I can with my family when we have get-togethers. So it's to the point where we don't, even though we're both professed Christians, we don't discuss theology, we don't discuss the Bible, we don't discuss politics.
We don't discuss the most important things, because depending on what you believe about God, the gospel of Jesus Christ, depends whether you're going to spend eternity in the lake of fire or eternity with the Lord in the New Jerusalem. And if we don't talk about politics and absolutes in government, that determines whether or not we're going to have a communist flag or a papal flag flying over our country, or a historic Reformation flag with a government with limited powers. So I like limited powers, and I like the right to own guns, and I like freedom of speech and conscience. All that's born out of the Bible in the hand of the common man that produced the Reformation and Western civilization. So she's just another feminist, and she doesn't want to hear what you have to say. And may she reap what she sows.
Okay, well, okay, I wasn't going to go down this track, but I'll be as quick as possible. So it's getting to the point where we have family get-togethers like Thanksgiving or whatever. not only can we not discuss politics, current events, religion, theology, we can't discuss the weather. But say, oh, we obviously need to cut back on our carbon footprint, whatever that means. So where there's, we're releasing too much CO2. Oh, okay. Hey, okay. So we can't talk about the weather because of you can't. Oh, because everything's to be blamed, or besides white supremacy, everything is to be blamed on climate change, or what they used to call, quote, global, close quote, warming. Okay, so we won't discuss the weather. Okay, hey, let's talk about something safe. Sports. Well, I can no longer support my team because they no longer support Black Lives Matter, and they didn't have a Pride Night in June.
Yeah. I got a better idea. Why not just get rid of all professional sports? Why even watch it? It's a total waste of time. I see two savage blacks got in a fight at the pitcher's mound, some Rodriguez and some other guy, and Rodriguez knocked him out, knocked the black guy out. So are we going to baseball games to watch fights? Same way with hockey. We're going to hockey to see all these white guys fight? Or are we going to football to see these big blacks fight? I mean, are we now Romans, where we like to go into the Roman arena and see the gladiators fight? Jim Brown said in his book, in his particular book, Out of Bounds, and I enjoyed that book. He said, I was a gladiator for 9 years when I played professional football. It's nothing more than gladiator games, and I believe the child of God has no business watching them. Forget them.
Well, amen. And of course, there's a reason why they call it bread and circuses. Yeah. Because is there any real difference between, even though we may be a little bit more technologically advanced, is there any difference between the United States and ancient Rome, other than the technology?
Well, there's a book that will answer that question for you, and it's titled, Are We Rome? And it's by Cullen Murray. It's right on my shelf here. I recommend our listener gets the book and read it. And he shows all of the parallels between the Roman Empire and the American Empire. Of course it is. We're the Pope's Holy Roman, 14th Amendment, socialist, communist, corporate, fascist, American government, American Empire. It's identical. They've modeled it. And as I teach my class on private citizenship, I show all the parallels between Roman Empire, Roman citizenship, and American Empire, U.S. citizenship of March 9th, 1933. We are Rome. We're conducting crusades around the world, just as the Romans' legions did. So even the Americas are called American legions. There's American Legion in most major cities, got after the Roman Legion. Of course we're Rome. Of course our military is fighting the crusades of the Pope. There's nothing to do with us, the people.
And of course, so I'm sorry, I was looking something up because I have things written down. Okay, so just to let you know, there's a college, I believe, in Atlanta, Georgia, historically black college called Raymond Brown. I believe that's correct.
It's an all-black college. You said
historically black. I'm sorry, it's called Brown Morris. And effective this week, they reinstated their mask policy for staff and students. Now, I know this may sound like a dated topic, and it is. So they said
you say it's a black college. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's called Morris Brown College.
Okay, but it's not a black college just for blacks. Anybody can go there, right? So what you're saying?
Well, as I said, it's a historically black college.
Oh, historically black college, I see.
Like Morehouse.
Oh, okay. So like Morehouse College, that's right. Mm-hmm. So you can have black colleges, but we can't have any white colleges. Is that what you're saying? See, so that's the real racism. And it's against white people. The moment I come along and call for a new white nation or a white college or teach our white Protestant history, I'm some sort of a racist and bigoted and prejudiced individual. But they can have their black colleges. They can have their Morehouse College, but that's okay because we're in the minority. Yeah, big deal. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We should have our white college. By the way, no college should ever get one dime from the federal government, from the national government. Let them rise or fall on their own merits. So, I think we started a white college where we teach white Protestant history. I think we do quite well. White Baptist history. Yeah.
Well, if you have a place like Luther College, which is, I believe, I want to say Minnesota, and I'm sure someone will correct me on that, but there's a Luther College somewhere. They have a lesbian who's the president there.
Well, so they're not Lutheran then. They're pagan, with the name Lutheran over it.
Okay. So, anyhow, this school called Raymond Brown, which is historically black, in Atlanta, Georgia, effective this week, for the next couple of weeks, they've been reimposed the mask policy for staff and students because the case rates are rising, I guess, in Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is. They haven't said anybody has got sick, been hospitalized, or died. They're just concerned about the case count. Now,
which is probably a lie, but go ahead. Well,
be that as it may, I mean, as we discussed 3 years ago, this thing they're calling SARS-CoV-2, whatever it is, has never been proven even to exist, other than CGI, computer graphics. Okay. Now, and something we've discussed several times before, and as a quick reminder, the inventor of the PCR, the polymerase chain reactor, Gary Banks Mullis, said specifically he never designed it to diagnose any illness, only to identify genetic material. So, I realize they're shying away from the PCR. So Mullis actually came out and said this, not once, but at least twice publicly. Shouldn't that, raise some concerns for people?
What ought to raise us concerns is he died suddenly. They killed him for that. They killed Mullins for that. He offered to debate Fauci, nor shortly thereafter, he was dead.
Oh, okay, so something I've said before, and I know we've covered this on more than one occasion, so forgive me for repeating myself. Gary Banks Mullis lived from the 28th of December 1944, so he died on August the 7th, 2019, just before this whole nonsense started. August 7th just so happens to be the date on 1814, 25 years earlier, the Jesuits were restored. I realize that date is a pure coincidence.
Oh, of course. So it was August 7th, 1814, when they were
2019. Yes, it was in 1814 when they were restored.
August 7th, 1814. I thought it was the 15th, but okay, August 7th. You would know, George.
Oh, okay. Well, anyhow, so he said point blank, I never designed the PCR to diagnose anything. Moreover, he did an interview with Gary Knowles, who co-wrote the book, the 2014 book, Death by Medicine, which I highly recommend.
Gary Knowles also wrote another book called The Egg Project. And it's a wonderful book on all the value of an egg, and specifically to eat them raw. And I try to eat 2 to 4 raw eggs a day. Go ahead.
Okay, so Kerry was on this interview.
One more thing I try to do, I try to drink a little bit of urine a couple times a day, too. It's also good for me. Everybody can know it. Yep, go ahead.
All right, so your detractors will have more material to use.
That's right. That's exactly right. In fact, they ought to do it themselves. They might feel better. Go ahead, George.
Okay, anyhow, but as I said, Kerry was on with Gary back. He did an interview back in 1996, and the first medical application for his PCR was to identify HIV, a human immunovirus or whatever it means. And I guess some time ago, I guess this would have been in the early 1990s, sometime in the 1990s. Luc Montagnier, who was, he allegedly identified HIV, but nobody's ever been able to replicate his results. He's a French virologist, as you might be able to glean from his name. So I guess Montagnier was at a conference in Southern California, which is where Mullis was living. And he ran into him, He said, "Hey, Luke, I just wondering, could you show me a paper? This is almost like a Birds of Prey, Neil Armstrong type or Buzz Aldrin type situation." I said, "Luke, I just wondering, could you show me your documentation saying that you isolated AIDS? Also, do you know of any paper anywhere in the world in any language saying that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS?" And Montague didn't hit him. He said, "Well, Kerry, it was a pleasure to meet you. Have a good evening."
Yep. Can't talk about that because you can't answer those kinds of questions and be honest, and you would blow the whole game. So very good. Yep.
Okay, so he said, well, Mullis was the opinion that perhaps HIV is real, maybe not. But he said there's no documentation saying that it causes AIDS.
That's correct. And the book that I have on that is written by, Duisberg, titled AIDS. Mm-hmm. And they say the very same thing. Yep.
Boy, so, yes, that's why I like hanging out with you, Brother Eric, because I pick up these valuable little tidbits.
Remember, George, your books are your weapons of war. And when you say something, and you can revert back to the page and book number and the book, and that helps. That enables you to win your debate when you go after these people that are saying false things.
Okay,
and prove it. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the school, Raymond Brown, which is a private liberal arts school in Atlanta, Georgia. So for the next couple of weeks, they're going to be requiring masks for their students and staff because of the increased case rates, whatever that means. Even though the COVID state of federal emergency ended on May the 11th, so you're talking over 3 months ago. Also, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, ended its state of emergency for COVID back in June of 2021, so over 2 years ago. Now, so there never was an emergency, but there's no pretext of an emergency, either on the state or national level. So they're just simply making up stuff as they go along.
Yeah, and what they ought to do, what the students ought to do, is say, listen, we're not putting up with this. You're going to do this to us, we're leaving. And we want our money back. And that would end that real quick.
Okay, so you have a similar case here, a situation here in California. There's a place called Good Earth grocery store. It's like your quintessential tree-hugging, hippy-dippy supermarket. You know, everything they sell vegetarian, vegan stuff, and all that sort of stuff, food. So I guess effective today, they're requiring masks for their employees, not for their customers, only for their employees, because I guess the case rates in Marin County, which is where this is, are increasing. They have like 3 cases per 100,000 people. Okay, so all right.
Well, would they do that if they got the flu? Would they have masks if people got the flu? 3 cases out of what, 100,000? No, they wouldn't do that. It's just another excuse to muzzle the people, get them used to being muzzled and breathing their own bacteria and getting low oxygen and a host of other toxic things that are a result of those damnable masks.
Oh, okay, but they're only looking out for their best interest.
Right. Yeah, I'm just looking out for you. Whenever anybody says, I'm looking out for you, you need to look out for a punch or a shot or whatever that's coming your way, because that's what they mean.
So it's just like
they're looking out for you at all. Go ahead.
So it's just like when Jacinda Ardern, who's now a professor or an instructor at Harvard, says she was only looking out for the New Zealanders when she disarmed them back in 2019.
Oh, yes, of course. And that was an inside job. It was a government op. I have a guy that lives there, and he sent me all the information. But go ahead.
And it's just like the emperor up in Canada, Justin Castor Trudeau, or whatever his name is. And by the way, Justin and his wife are getting divorced. So he has my condolences. He's
probably sick of all his fornications and adulteries, just like his father, Fidel, did. But go ahead.
Or who is his father? I forget.
Fidel, baby. Fidel Castro.
Fidel.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Looks just like him, acts just like him. Same Jesuits run him just like they ran his daddy. And he's doing the same policies there in Canada, except he's lit Canada on fire with his Jesuit coadjutors.
Okay, so who was Pierre Trudeau?
Pierre Trudeau was the pretended father of Justin.
Now, for what it's worth, I know I keep bouncing like a ping pong ball. Kathy O'Brien said Pierre Trudeau was a Jesuit, not a lay Jesuit, but was a full-on ordained Jesuit.
And that's in her book, Formation of America. That's correct.
So no, people will often call people Jesuits when they're technically speaking not. Like Gavin Newsom was never ordained. You could call him a lay Jesuit, or you could call
a Jesuit coadjutor. That's what they're called. Jesuit coadjutors. They're at the aid of someone who's actually a Jesuit.
Okay, now there are some people who speculate that Antony Fauci is actually was secretly ordained.
No doubt.
Okay, I don't have proof of that, but I wouldn't surprise.
I don't either, but let the works prove it. Georgetown, Holy Cross, his unflinching lies when it comes to AIDS and COVID, because his first rodeo was AIDS, So,
well, actually, before that was actually cancer. He was a protege of Robert Gallo.
Robert Gallo, that's right.
So, I know I've said this before, and forgive me for ripping off material from George Carlin. Have you ever noticed that whatever the United States government engages in a war on abstract, whether it's poverty, hunger, cancer, terrorism, whatever, the problem gets exponentially worse?
That's right. Like LBJ's war on poverty. Beginning of the real destruction of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant middle class. Yep.
Well, also, and you could say it was part of the destruction of the black family. Because
it was. I have a couple of my black students say the worst thing that happened to the black community was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Destroyed their businesses. Opened the door for these huge corporations to come in. They're run by white men in secret societies.
Okay, so okay, well, generally speaking, I realize people have criticized that sometimes I go on a little bit long on commentary, and I probably should try to take a more Joe Friday approach. Just the facts, ma'am. And yes, I'll do my.
Facts. We just gave him a couple of facts right then and there, George. So you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, and forgive me for making all these dated cultural references. Joe Friday was an old TV detective played by Jack Webb, who is a devout Roman Catholic, by the way. But
of course, there's no greater blasphemers than these Roman Catholics on TV. They really mastered it. Except maybe some pagan Jews can match them in their blasphemy. But it's generally the Italian Catholics and the Irish Catholics. They got first place.
Okay. So, anyhow, I'm looking at my notes here. And so it seemed now over the weekend, I guess there was a storm that hit Southern California. They're calling it Hurricane Hillary. Yes, I'm not making that up. And it struck, I guess, on Saturday, which was Bill Clinton's birthday.
George, Hurricane Hillary. That sounds feminist. That sounds sexist, and it also sounds sexist and bigoted. Bigoted. That's right. Talking about hell. Why, that's a bigoted topic, George. And you combine hell with Hillary, and you got a bigoted sexist topic. So who dreamed that up? Some white man. I bet some white man came up with that name. Don't you think, George? Go ahead.
Well, yes. So what have they been saying? Well, even though Hillary has been out of office or out of government for about a decade, she's still doing damage.
She's still in the Pope's Council on Foreign Relations out of New York City. It's like her hubby, the betrayer of South Africa and the builder of Red China.
Well, so I guess that was their birthday present, the Jesuits' birthday present by naming the storm Hillary that hit over the weekend of his birthday. So anyhow, so speaking of which, you have a situation where you have, well, actually, Hawaii's not on fire right now, but the rest of the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington State, and British Columbia, Canada, are specifically in Washington, in and around Spokane. Now, I've been busy doing other things, but it seems as if, gee, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it seems as if that these conflagrations are being orchestrated. But as I said, that's a pure coincidence because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And it's just because you have all these fires burning all over the West Coast and other places. But
George, it's called war. It's war. The Jesuits are doing this in preparation for the Red Chinese invasion that will take place, who knows, within 5 to 8 years, something like that. This is why Bill Clinton gave the Red Chinese all of our top technology, specifically and also missiles that travel, or torpedoes that travel underwater 140 miles an hour, and the tip of the missile is the only, of the torpedo is the only thing that touches the water. So it can sink any aircraft carrier. That technology was American, white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, Baptist, and Jewish, American Jewish technology, probably aided by some Catholics, but they're not original thinkers. And so that technology was given to the savage Red Chinese, whose government was put in power by the Jesuits in 1949. So they built the Chinese military, given them all of our top conventional technology, and then the Chinese are busy buying up farmland in this country by the millions of acres. And now they're busy burning the California area, Southern California. They're burning up in British Columbia, which is a coastal province of Canada. They're burning up there. They're bringing the Red Chinese soldiers in as quote-unquote immigrants in through the South, as they're coming in with the droves of alien Roman Catholic Hispanics. And it's an invasion. We have a congresswoman out of New York who is trying to stand against a bill that prohibits any more farm sales to the Red Chinese, and she's Chinese. So you got them in Congress, you got them everywhere, you got them invading the country, and the typical American white people couldn't care less, or they're concerned, so they're going to go with Trump into the arms of the new right, with Steve Bannon and all those other senators. So this is what's happening. It's called invasion. And that's why I've always preached for the last 20 years that each state or a county needs to declare its independence and stop being betrayed by Washington and start beginning their own protection of their own new nation. That's the solution, of course, with repentance and belief on Christ. Right, George?
Okay, I realize we're almost done, but I just want to make a couple more points.
George, plenty of time. Plenty of time, George. We're not on an hourly schedule here, so whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't want to bore the listeners.
I'm sure they're not bored. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, so you see, I try to be respectful to the audience because I say, hey, if I were listening to this, or if I were out there, why do I want to listen to this? So I try to be cognizant of that. I try to be respectful of their time, and I try to be respectful of their intelligence. So having said that, I probably should get off the air. No, just joking.
But you have respect to their comedy, too. You always get a good joke in for them, so I'm sure that's another reason why they listen. I know that's the reason why I listen, George. I like some of your comedy. It's great. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. But in all seriousness, I know we've spoken at great lengths about the whole Maui situation, and therefore, I mean, I don't want to beat this to death, However, but people don't seem to appreciate the gravity of the situation. And I'm using that word correctly, the seriousness. That is a valid meaning of the word gravity. You have a bunch of politicians and apparatchiks on the state and local level in Hawaii, Lahaina, Maui, the state of Hawaii, who at best are incompetent. At worst, they appear to be blackmailed or bribed. Now, this is probably not a revelation to anybody because you've had crooked politicians and governmental employees ever since you've had governments and politics. Yes, I get that. But the amount of criminality and perceived ineptitude in Hawaii is breathtaking, or at least appears to me. Now, I'm stating my opinion here. I forgot his name. The fellow who was it, Herman Ayana, who was, I guess, the director of the emergency, like basically the state version of FEMA in Hawaii, just resigned last week. And he gave a press conference in which he stated that he decided not to sound the sirens when the fires hit. He said, oh, people would have been tempted to go run into the fires. Really? Now, well, this is something most people...
That shows you how stupid they think those Hawaiians really are. And us for also. That's why they gave us the single bullet theory in the Kennedy assassination. Rip-roaring around, change this direction, and they think the American people are going to believe that stuff. It shows how stupid they think we are.
Okay, so he stepped down. He's not going to go to prison. I mean, at minimum, he should spend the rest of his life behind bars, breaking big rocks into little rocks. Minimum. But then you also have the police chief there, John Pelletier. Now he was like the assistant police chief in Vegas back in October 2017 after the whole Chief Paddock, Mandalay Bay nonsense. So how is it that you have somebody who's working in Las Vegas ended up in Maui, and two of the biggest events in U.S. history?
It's simple, George. It's called coincidence. Okay. It's time you start waking up here. It's coincidence. It just happens, George. It's like you becoming a man. It happened over billions of years. It's just coincidence and random choice guesses and so on. Come on now, George. Let's just believe the doctrines of the humanistic papist church.
Okay. Speaking of which, we've discussed the 1970 film Tor, and this actually happened. Do you remember the radar scene in Tor?
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to refresh your memories, and for those who've not seen it, I recommend the film. It's not bad. You have a couple of radar technicians on the morning of Sunday, December the 7th, at about 7 o'clock local time. They see a strange several same blips on the screen. So they phoned it in and said, hey, there's this strange blip that seems like a large formations of planes coming in from the east, the northeast. Do you think we should do something about it? And the officer there said, don't worry about it. It's probably just that flight of B-17s coming in from the west coast, from Hamilton Field in Marin County, which is the last place where my dad was stationed. I know that's just a piece of useless trivia. And I said, oh, okay. No biggie. So this happened almost an hour before the attack began. I realized, hey, people make mistakes all the time.
Yeah, they made mistakes. Like Hitler telling his panzers to stop at Dunkirk there and not annihilate the British Expeditionary Force. We just made a mistake, and we won't bomb and strafe them and have our panzers annihilate them. And boy, that would end the war. We can't have that now. Of course, we want the sacking of Germany, and if we end that, then if we stop the Dunkirk invasion there with the Expeditionary Force, we can't destroy Germany. It was all a mistake. They just made a boo-boo, right? These guys these generals go to school, George. They go to military academies to learn the tactics of war, so that when they're faced with certain instances where they have to decide upon the principles that they've been taught, they're going to make those decisions. It's called the art of war. There was no mistake.
Okay, so McGeorge Bundy just made a boo-boo when he ordered air cover at Bay of Pigs.
Yeah, well, I just made a mistake. I'll just cancel the air cover there. We'll just sacrifice those 3,000 Cubans or whatever to Jesuit Castro. Because after all, McGeorge Bundy is a member of Skull and Bones, as well as National Security Advisor to Kennedy. Kennedy was furious about it. So anyway, no, McGeorge Bundy was a traitor, and that we know because Fletcher Prouty wrote that in his book, JFK, that McGeorge Bundy canceled the air cover. That's according to Colonel Fletcher Prouty. Yep.
Well, and of course, it was just simply a mistake. The Red Air Force didn't provide air cover for the Polish resistance in Warsaw, not once but twice, 1943 and 1944. Well,
and Stalin's army waited some 6 miles away and watched the Nazis kill those Polish men that were courageous enough to revolt against that Nazi occupation in Warsaw, because the Jesuits running Stalin wanted those virulent, strong Polish men dead so that they wouldn't be alive when Poland was given to Joseph Stalin. That's why they did it.
Oh, okay. So you know what? I now want to change my position. I'm not only a bad luck theorist, but I'm also a mistake theorist.
There we go. I like that. Bad luck theorist. That's a good one, George. Bad luck theorist and mistake theorist. There we go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess.
Okay, so
I guess Eisenhower made a mistake when he landed those American men at Omaha Beach, and they only bombed the ocean. They only bombed behind of it, but they didn't bomb any of the big guns. That was just a mistake, wasn't it? More mistakes, and they'll make him a hero for it.
Well, of course, they'll give him the White House for it.
Well, give him the White House, that's right, because he facilitated a successful papal crusade for Pius XII and the sodomite Francis Cardinal Spellman, who was sodomite buddies with J. Edgar Hoover. Oh, boy. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's why J. Edgar Hoover, among other things, received the Sword of Loyola.
Did he receive the Sword of Loyola?
Yes, and he also received a minimum of 15 honorary degrees from Catholic institutions. This is according to Steve Burnross's 2009 book, The FBI and the Catholic Church, 1935 to 1962. There's a picture of
the Catholic Church.
I actually have a print copy of it. I'm sorry?
I'll write that down. Who's the author?
Steve Burnross, WURMROSS, 2009. So there's a picture of, I guess, Hoover, in 1943, receiving an honorary degree from Notre Dame.
I imagine it was good old Theodore Hesburgh that did it.
Hesburgh was probably just ordained, so he probably wasn't a major.
There yet? Okay, but he went on to be friends with Hoover for sure.
Well, yes. Anyhow, so you have all these acts throughout history that appear to be gross incompetent, and nobody is punished. Well, okay, you have this apparatchik in Hawaii who resigned, but he's not going to prison. He's not going to be put to death. But gee, that appears to be a recurring pattern. Why is it that people basically, more recently last year I forgot, it was in May of last year. Why is it the police in Uvalde were told to stand down?
Well, the ones who told them to stand down were concerned for their health. They didn't want the police to get hurt, so just tell them to stand down, and that way the savages can rape, pillage, and plunder and murder with impunity, but the police will be safe. That's a good decision.
Okay. So why is it all throughout the last few years, you're talking like 3 years ago, in major cities across the U.S., Chicago, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, the Twin Cities, police departments were told not to do their job?
There's a police department recently, George, that the entire thing just resigned. I think it's in Minnesota. I'm not sure, but the entire police force of that particular city resigned. That's good because it creates more crime. the savages, the majority savage blacks, some savage Hispanic invaders, and the certain savage whites, most of them Roman Catholic, they can carry on with all their savagery and pillaging and plundering to justify Donald Trump coming to the rescue and restoring order. Isn't that wonderful? That's why they did it. And woe to you if you pull out your guns and you start shooting these savages, because that's curtailing crime. And we can't have that. If we curtail crime ourselves as citizens, why then we can't justify having a military dictator. That's why they did it. That's why they cut all those funds to the cops, building the new right.
And of course, and most of these departments are usually led by women, by lesbians.
What's wrong with that, George? Are you against the women, George?
And of course, they get double points if they're black, lesbian, transgender.
Oh yeah, they got to be black and they got to be a woman and pro sodomy. It's just what white power structure wants. Because the blacks aren't elected. The blacks are not behind that, most of them. Yeah, it's the white power structure pushing this. And of course, they control the elections. They control the ballots.
Now, I know I've said this to you before, but case in point, the current chief of police in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is Danielle Outlaw. I know, as I said, we've discussed her before. She was born in Oakland, California. She went to a Holy Names High School there in Oakland, and she got her undergrad degree.
Oakland is a black city, for those people who don't know. I was born in Oakland in 1953. My grandparents lived on, what was that street? They lived on, what is it, MacArthur Boulevard, right off MacArthur Boulevard. I saw the first murder my first murder of a white man with some savage blacks shot him in a little store right next to my grandmother's place. Oakland is a savage black town, especially East Oakland. But what from I understand now is that the savage Hispanics have moved in there and driven out the savage blacks.
Okay, so case in point, I know we talked about Danielle Outlaw. She went to Holy Names High School in Oakland. She got her undergrad degree from University of San Francisco in criminal justice. She originally was hired by
what's the University of San Francisco, George, for the listeners?
Jesuits.
Oh, so she was trained by the Jesuits for criminal justice. Great.
Now, having gone to a Catholic high school, Holy Names, in Oakland for 4 years. Now, she worked for the Oakland PD for something like 20 years, then she left. Then she got hired as the chief of police in Portland, Oregon, for 5-6 years. Then back in 2020, she was hired by the Philadelphia Police Department. So she's worked for 3 different agencies on different coasts. Now, when she gave a press conferences after her hiring back in early 2020, she said, I'm going to implement a number of policies here, such as female police officers can now wear clear nail polish. Well, thank you, Chief.
Why don't we just have all the police officers be women and with all their nails polished? Why don't we just make them all women, all blacks, and better yet, all lesbians? All black female lesbians. Just make them all running the police departments. How about that, George? That's real progress, and we should be so happy about that. Maybe you got to do, what do they call it, the sex therapy people that are going to have their sex change? Have a few of them in there, too. Yeah.
Okay, and then they can have you hire people who identify as purple unicorns. And of course, now, as it just so happens, I realize this is coincidental, but she wasn't there, Outlaw wasn't there for a whole year. But in 2020, they had a record number of crimes by every metric.
Oh, I don't believe that. George, I believe that as soon as that black woman became the chief of police, all those blacks in Philadelphia decided to trade up their game, straighten it out, and became upstanding citizens, working hard every day, paying their taxes, and not destroying the city. I don't believe for 1 second, George, there has to be a reason why. And it has to be some white man caused all those blacks to commit all that crime and all those Hispanics. Got to be some white man.
Exactly. So, and of course, they say, well, correlation is not causation. Fair enough. But I guess the criminals in Philly decided to give Danielle a nice housewarming present by making sure that they didn't get too bored.
Get too bored with what?
Well, they need to commit crime so the cops would have something.
Yes, of course. Committing crime is fun, especially when we're committing crimes against those damnable white people. Got to kill them and rob them and rape them and just put them through living hell, because after all, they deserve it. And we got to end that race. So they love it. They go out every day and commit those crimes against white people. And the white people are too stupid to know that there's a war waging against them from several places, not just the majority savage blacks and the majority savage Hispanics, but also from the socialist communist Jews working for the Pope, as well as the Muslims working for the Pope, as well as the military government in Washington working for the Pope, devising everything they possibly can to devalue the money, discriminate against them and everything, to the point that they will wake up and welcome with open arms the new right. But right now, most of the white people are fast asleep.
Well, okay, and then you have these songs which we discussed before, Rich Man North of Richmond, and a while back you had Try That in a Small Town, that are galvanizing the new right. They said, wait a second, these aren't songs, these are anthems. Yeah, you're right. Why am I working in Rich Man North of Richmond? Why am I working myself to death with overtime for basically worthless fiat currency?
Yeah, well, they're asking the right question. Good for him. Now he needs to turn it onto this radio station, this radio broadcast, and realize that it's the papacy. But that's one step beyond. That's one step too far. We can't say that. Why, that can't possibly be true. And so they're going to keep growing around the dark.
Oh, okay. So could I just bring up one other topic before we sign off?
Yes, I'll give you a dispensation, George. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. We've discussed the Tavistock Institute, which was officially established in 1947, in England. So they're basically, their job is they work with MI6 and the CIA and other alphabet soup agencies or entities to basically social engineer society. Now, the primary vehicle
social engineer it out of existence. Social engineer the white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and Baptist culture of Western civilization right out of existence. And they're doing a real good job. Right, George?
Now, in the last 75 plus years, the primary vehicle they've used is music in all genres. Rap, hip hop, jazz, well, not so much jazz, but definitely country and popular. So I just was
years ago in World War II, it was swing.
Yes.
Swing with furthering fornication and sexual impurity. Yeah.
Okay. So why do I bring this up? How many songs have there been going back to at least the 1960s that have dealt with fire or some other correlated topic? Smoke, burning, whatever. So just to name a few, and this is not an exhaustive list, probably one of the first ones was Johnny Cash's 1963 Ring of Fire. Now, we've actually talked about Johnny Cash. Just as a quick reminder, he was a known Freemason, and his first wife was a Roman Catholic. As a matter of fact, his children with the first wife were actually baptized Catholic. He was also in the U.S. Air Force. Now, that's not an indictment per se, but it increases the possibility that he may have had an intelligence background. Yeah. I don't know that definitively. So you're going to say something?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, he fit all the parameters.
Okay, so one of his first hits was the 1963 hit "Ring of Fire," which his second wife, June Carter, actually wrote for him. And there's a whole bunch of other songs. You have "Fire" by Arthur Brown, 1968. "Smoke on the Water," Deep Purple, 1973. "Something's Burning" by Kenny Rogers in the first edition, 1969.
There's always a sexual content in the fire they're singing about. Something, and I think it's cold love. I mean, there's always a sexual innuendo when they're talking about fire. Right?
Oh, okay. But going back specifically to Ring of Fire, now the Jesuits, as I said, are not only the expert psychologists and psychiatrists, they invented those disciplines. Now, they use Jews for plausible deniability, like Sigmund Freud, but those are their babies. So they know how to affect people's emotions. So if they can control how people speak, they can control how they think. If they control how they think, they can control how they behave. Now, going back to the aforementioned, something's burning. So what that does is it takes a concept that most people don't even ponder. It's something like, what it does is it mainstreams and normalizes something that shouldn't be mainstream or normal, being burnt. But then you have, now the Jesuits realize different people have different tastes. You know, some people like country, some people like pop music, and they had to appeal to different people of different eras and different generations, the 1960s, the 1970s, and so forth. And they'll account for the fact that songs will be played on the radio or YouTube or some other format. So we've been inundated for decades, for generations, with all these songs about burning. So what that does is, gee, I don't want to be burnt. Of course, I mean, you don't want to be burnt in a physical sense or in a temporal sense, and you definitely don't want to be burnt in an eternal sense. So what that does is the Jesuits realize when people operate on the subconscious level, not actively thinking, they cannot differentiate between literal and figurative. Now, in the song Ring of Fire, the singer, Johnny Cash, is talking metaphorically. He's talking about metaphorically being burned. But if you're talking to people who are basically overgrown children, wait a second. He's making this something that is something that abhorrent is now acceptable.
Yep. Black is white and white is black. Jesuit maxim. So anything they can do to demoralize the culture, to dumb it down, to deprive it of its history, that's what they will do. So that the people are bloody in their hands and run by their emotions. They have no history, and hence we are Africanized. America is an African nation with an African culture, completely given over to sex and fighting and fornicating, and with no respect for anyone who really excels in any science or art. And so that's the typical African nation in Africa, and all they do is they're in tribal warfares all the time. And that's why they produce no culture and no advancements in civilization. That's exactly where we are today.
Okay, if you look at news reports that have just come out, or over the last several years, whether you're talking Maui, Spokane, Washington, Malibu, California, Santa Rosa, California, Paradise, California, people say the witnesses and survivors almost say the same thing. It looks like a war zone. It looks as if that a bomb went off, or several bombs.
Because it is a war zone. That's the conclusion they can't come to. But go ahead.
Okay, so, well, I just found out that we've gone on actually over an hour, so perhaps we can pick this up soon.
Okay, George. I'll just keep these to an hour now, and we're 8 minutes over. So, George, you want to give your sign-off information, how people can contact you?
Okay, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, please drop me a line at georgewidger1969@gmail.com. That's GEORWIDGER. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Amen. Well, George, thanks so much for being with us today. May the Lord bless you in whatever you do, and I'll have you back probably next Tuesday. I'll have you on at least once a week. So, well, there, John Phelps. Thank you for tuning in today. I have a book, Vatican Assassins, One in the House of My Friends. Go to my website, VaticanAssassins.org. Order yourself an ebook there, and I have some other things that I offer. Also, go to 24/7 World Radio. I have some